You're watching Den Pubs TV.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Again, I want to thank you all for coming tonight. The purpose of this meeting is to answer any questions that you have on the audit that we had, and hopefully we'll clear up any misconceptions out there that have been floating around. But, you know, we had an audit, we had 17 recommendations, and that's what they were, just recommendations for things that we can do better. And we've pretty much corrected all 17. So we thought long and hard about some kind of a format for this thing. I mean, we just can't have a free-for-all, because once you put the 5 of us together, it's a quorum, and we need a record of this meeting. So I know people may be intimidated about coming up to the mic, but we've got to be able to get get your comments, and so that's about the only way we can do it. Secondly, hopefully you're going to be asking a lot questions, and we got quite a few people here tonight. I'd like to limit it to one question at a time, and then we'll, so everybody can talk, and then if people have a second question, then we can go back to that. But I'm not going to put the clock on because I like this to be informal, but it's a question doesn't take that long to ask. So hopefully we can move along. And, all 5 of us are going to try and answer questions. It's not just going to be me. And Mark may actually even answer a question or two. I guess we'll start. Sure. Fran got an email from Christine Vega. Oh, one other thing. If somebody asks a question, please don't come up and ask it again, because I'm just going to say we already answered that. Okay, so don't waste your question. This is from Christine Vega. Is title pay a stipend? What's that? Like a bonus. No. Title pay was raises, okay? That's what it was. Some of them were 50 cents an hour. Some of them were $2 an hour. The salary people got lump sums. Some of them got $4,000. Some of them got $2,000, but it was always broken up into 52 weeks. So there was no bonuses ever, okay?
If not, is it considered a salary increase which occurs year after year?
That's correct. So let's say in 2008, you got a salary increase of $1 an hour because you became a welder, okay? You're not just a truck driver, you're a truck driver that can do welding. So obviously you make more than all the truck drivers do. So you got $1 an hour more. Well, the next year, you didn't get another $1, but you got that $1 that you were given out. We're not, wasn't just for 1 year. If you're a welder, you're always a welder, okay? Now, sometimes people had jobs and then they didn't stay in that job, and we took the money away from them. So let's say you were the secretary to the supervisor, okay? Secretary to the supervisor is entitled to a full-time secretary, but Louis never had a full-time secretary. He paid somebody $5,000 to be his secretary, okay? That was entitled pay. When I became supervisor, I had a different secretary. I took the money, the $5,000, away from the first one and gave it to somebody else to be my secretary. So you could lose title pay if you didn't do that title. What title pay really should have been called, and I don't know how this got started, but Carol's done some research into it. It should be called out of title pay. You have a title, you're a truck driver. You become a truck driver and a welder. Well, you're out of title, so you should get more money for doing a different job. You shouldn't get the same as everybody else.
You give job descriptions of people who.
Brandon, would you say that louder? Can you hear you?
Yes, it was, could you give the job description of the person who got the title pay?
Payroll clerk. Secretary to the highway superintendent. Court clerk. Town clerk. Account clerk / controller. Laborer.
Excuse me, Frank. When you say payroll clerk, secretary to highway, is that a title and then the extra title? Or are these each?
No,
the extra
payroll
titles?
clerk is a separate title, and then secretary to the highway superintendent is a separate title.
So those were these extra titles that people got on top of their regular pay?
Well, no, this is what, this is the positions, the main position that they were in, okay?
And are these the positions that got additional title or out of title pay?
Well, with like the secretary to the highway superintendent, okay? She was a part-time secretary here, okay? And she worked part-time for the town, and then she worked part-time for the assessor, okay? The secretary to the highway superintendent left. So we moved this person up to secretary of the highway superintendent. She got a raise, in other words. So she got $7,000 in title pay because she's not a secretary anymore. She's doing a much more strenuous job, much more responsible job. She's not just sitting downstairs typing away. You know, she's in charge of much more responsibility. She's in charge of purchasing. She's in charge of a lot. Okay. So sometimes, I mean, title pay was used for many different things. I mean, I guess. Labor, I said. Another time for town clerk. MEO working foreman. MEO. Planning and zoning clerk. Maintenance mechanic. And the superintendent of highways. Building maintenance. They looked at 20 employees and they found 16 people were getting title pay. Some people were not getting title pay.
Frank, what's MEO?
Maintenance, they're truck drivers, mechanics, truck drivers. Okay, it's the guys at the highway garage. Yeah, machinery equipment operator. I knew that, I just drew a blank. Okay, so that question is answered, okay?
Frank, I have one thing. As far as the town clerk is concerned, Deb was the deputy town clerk. And in 2007, the town clerk left in the middle of the year. So he was going to retire in June. We had the person who was secretary of the highway, the assistant of the highway superintendent, took it for 6 months. She left, and Deb was appointed town clerk. That's why the you're talking about $2,000. The former town clerk left, and what Bob just changed for the 6 months, was getting $10,000 more than Deb. And her salary started at $10,000 less than that town clerk.
So Barden also been here for 30 years.
And Barb had been here for 30 years and was doing very good job.
But the other position wasn't replaced, so it's No, we say $50,000.
$50,000, we only have one deputy town clerk, or we have two. Yeah, which one of the two?
All right, Karen, you're up first. Can you come up to the podium? We have to get a record. I'm sorry.
I just want to ask you, Frank, last Monday, when we talked this about the title thing, you stated that you were aware, this was on the town board, okay, not the supervisor, you stated that you're aware of the title pay issue, and yet George McGowan got up at last Monday's meeting, he was also on the town board at the same time and said he was unaware. And I guess my question is, what is this board doing differently that all of you, all five of you, are aware of the decisions that are being made? Because that just, to me, seems crazy that this is going on. One of you is aware and one of you isn't aware, and it seems to me that a decision as important as that all of you should be aware of what's going on.
Moving forward, no raise or anything is given without full board approval in the resolution, the form of the resolution. No matter what the
So
form
in
is.
what you're saying then, that is anything that's a decision involving a monetary expense, then you all are aware of where the finances are being spent and what's going on. Is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're looking for. No raises are given out without full board approval. And the full resolution.
Jim, you got a question? Okay. Anybody along here, in front here, in this row? Okay, step up.
I would like a business card from all five of you. You have them, right?
I have one.
I have one.
Anybody else?
I do have one, I don't have it with me.
Well, you'll tell me how I will get it. Gentlemen, and two, ma'am, you will be able to supply me one?
All right, the last one I have is Warren County Clerk, but I'll get another one. I didn't realize it. Okay.
Just five we need.
Anybody else have a question? Dave? Barbara? Joanne?
I appreciate the explanation because it did help me understand a little bit more, and I guess in that case I wouldn't want to call it title pay either. I do understand from the way Christine Vega sounds that her concern was that it was like a bonus, and then therefore the bonus was carrying on, but you've corrected that.
There was never a bonus. It was always.
I guess one of the things for a lot of us that has come up in this particular issue in the audit is that as the way, I don't have all the paperwork in front of me, but the way that the audit team put it, it seems from the research that I've done that it's very rare that the audit team comes back on the answers that the board has given. In other words, of those 17 things, only one of them had an attachment saying to reference back to their next page, and that was where they still recommended that the money be recovered. So I think there's a few things in that need to be answered. One is the method of recovery, and I know that it's been brought up a few times, and that Resolution 70/2011 was done to correct that having not been voted on with the past sitting town board. And I know it involves not all of you here, and most of you here, and then again other people, as do a lot of these title pay things. My concern really is that if that resolution was done with the advice of council, then the town board, through passing a resolution like this, is really, it appears, attempting to cleanse an illegal act from the past. Because in the past, the money was given out without approval of the board, and it was given out, well, Frank, don't shake your head yet.
I'm answering your question.
Well, it might not be just for you to answer. It was not approved by the town board, which was not a legitimate thing to do. And number two was there was no evidence that they were worthy of what the state called stipends. And that's basically the way that they put it in the report. So what they're finding, I gather from the report, is that there's no documentations to go along with these so-called stipends. So doing a resolution after the fact is trying to correct what can be seen as a way to cleanse an illegal act that occurred in the past. So I have some real concerns with that, and I think that that's a big piece that needs to be addressed on this issue. You know, a lot of people have thoughts about title pay, and there certainly is a lot more in the audit. But that's where my biggest concern lies. I did say at the last town board meeting that I do think that people have ideas about how that could be recouped. And I did also mention that I don't think that that would be the responsibility of the employees, because I personally, and not everybody I've talked to agrees with this, but I personally see an employee giving that money back if it was incorrectly given. It's like giving somebody a candy bar and then 6 months later saying, hey, wait a minute, I want that candy back. Well, you can't have it back, you know. That's just an impossibility, and the same can be true with cash that's given out, or a check that's given out. So I don't see that as being it. My biggest problem is that the audit team asked that the town try to recoup the money, and rather than attempting to recoup the money, the town board chose to write a resolution to correct this issue from the past. And that's what I would like to see addressed, including with Mark as well, if possible.
You want to take a shot at this?
I didn't hear a question. And I listened really carefully. I understand the concern, but I didn't hear a question. I understand the concern.
I guess the final question, Mark, is in the fact that I, as a citizen, would like to see the money recouped according to the recommendation of the audit division. And I, as a citizen, see that I don't see the resolution as being fair. I see the resolution as being an attempt to circumvent what the audit team has done. So, no, it isn't necessarily a question. You know, it's a concern that we came to discuss. If the town lawyer can't discuss these things because it's not a question, then I'm not sure there's any reason to address him at all, because he's just not going to answer it. You know, so then, you know, and then so the town board is just going to do the same and just say, okay, it wasn't illegal and this is what we're going to do, and we're just, you know, we gave out the money, and oh well, some of us knew about it, some of us didn't know about it, but we thought it was fair, some of us didn't think it was fair, some of us didn't know about it, but we gave it out anyway, so now we wrote a resolution and okay, it's going away now, we're fine.
Well, that's not the way, Mark. You want me to try and...
I'm not being facetious, and I'm not trying to be glib, and I'm sure you're not going to be happy with my response, but I didn't hear a question the first time, I didn't hear a question the second time, I totally hear a concern, I believe that I totally understand your concern.
Are you not allowed to address the concern?
No, I don't have anything to say about the concern. I believe, I could be wrong, that I totally understand your concerns. This town board has made a decision, at least so far, about recouping or not recouping the funds.
Okay, then I guess...
Wait, I heard you out. Could you please hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a policy decision, not a legal decision. This town board has authority to make any number of policy decisions. You're exercising your right, in my opinion, very appropriately, very fairly and reasonably, to try to convince this town board to make a different policy decision. I don't make the policy decisions. I'm not being facetious and I'm not being glib. I provide legal advice essentially when asked, and I've done that. But I understand, I truly believe I understand your concern, and I truly don't have any comment about it because it's a policy matter, and we're addressing it appropriately to the decision makers of the town of Lake George.
I guess if in a question format that I would put to you then, Mark, is would it have been possible to have a different resolution to address this issue of this stipend money in the way that the audit division asked, in that they asked for the money to be recouped by the town?
There's no question it would be possible. The town board could pass a resolution saying, this is just one example, the town board could pass a resolution saying, let's file legal action tomorrow suing each and every one of those former and or current employees seeking the money back. That's just one example. There's no question there could be other resolutions.
Okay, so that's the point in a sense that I was trying to get with, because there are other possibilities and there are other roads that could be taken, because to me, in what's in the audit report, you know, that was their observation, that there was no documentation There was a number of things in there. You all know what it was. But those things didn't exist. And you know when the resolution was done, when you voted on the resolution, at that time, the audit report was not made public yet. So there were two people that I know personally that were at that meeting, that are here at the meeting tonight, that attempted, they didn't know what you were talking about, you know? So there was no conversation about it, there was nobody getting up to a podium, there was nobody opposing it. So there it was, and it was done, and I know 4 of you voted for it and 1 of you abstained. I think the concern is now for the community is if the audit report is saying that this money in their recommendation should be recouped, what attempt has the town made to do that or to think about it? And that, to me, was to be part of the conversational part of the night. Not just this is what we did, so therefore this is the way it is. Because it could have been a different way. And the way that it was done, I personally see as an attempt to hide it from the public. And I think that this town board wants to be open and upfront. You know, you wouldn't have agreed to this meeting tonight with the community if you didn't want to do that. So I think that that should and needs to be a part of tonight's conversation for people to get that out. I have my opinion, but there are people here with different opinions.
And I have my opinion too. We discussed this thoroughly. We actually had 2 executive sessions on this, and we came up with a conclusion that it was not proper to ask the employees to pay back the money.
I agree.
Yes.
Just to make sure I'm fully understanding, the example I gave would essentially, I like the way you put it, so I'm following your lead. The example I gave would be the town board could have decided to authorize me, directly authorize me to sue the town former and current employees to get the candy bars back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that is actually the direction. That's how I feel. That's how I personally feel. That might not be how other people in the audience feel. But what I'm thinking tonight is that I feel that it's the responsibility of the town board as our elected representatives to listen to what the town people have and what they have in ideas for how that can be done. Because my personal opinion is you can't get the candy bar back. There's other people in the audience might feel, well, too bad if you think you can't get it back, garnish their salaries and get it back. People can have a different opinion.
Do you think that we should do with the citizens group that they have to do the explanation Frank gave at the last meeting? If they feel as though the people should give it back?
I was only speaking for myself last
It
week.
was unjustifiable. I mean, if you were working for someone that gave you a raise, and you went on for several years receiving that raise, all of a sudden you turn around and say for the last 5 years, because the procedure wasn't done properly, you need to give all that money back.
That's the candy bar that I was just talking about, Scott. If you get a candy bar, you got that bag of candy from Halloween, you can't give it back once you've eaten it.
But I think the word candy bar makes it sound, again, back to the word, you know, the misuse of the word stipend. I think it was a legitimate raise. These people worked for it and they received the raise.
And they deserved it.
And they deserved it.
But you're saying that now. There were other board members that did not know about it. Again, going back to the audit report, it was undocumented. Board members did not vote on it. Okay, so there were problems with the way that it was done. Okay, and the audit report is asking you to recoup the money.
And we disagree with them.
Right, and what I'm saying tonight and asking tonight is, or maybe I'll just make it as a statement, I think it would be wise to listen to your community to see what opinions they have on it.
That's what we're here for.
I can't just ask you that question. I was kind of don't know how you feel.
Well, I told you that I'm not for the employees giving it back, but there are different people that have different opinions, and in that particular one, I wouldn't speak for the entire citizens group. That's my own personal opinion. I'll let you know if something comes up on another issue.
Excuse me, Frank. I looked up the word stipend and salary. Entitlement? Was that used here? Was that used in the audit, the entitlement? I don't know. I mean, I think they used this thing. And the two explanations, declare that a stipend is an allowance, salary, or pension, especially a sum of money. A regular or fixed payment for services as a salary, or a periodic payment as a pension or an allowance. The synonym is salary. So I went to salary. A periodic fixed payment for services, especially for political or professional services. Synonym, stipend, wage, pay, compensation. The salary is applied to train and skilled workers in professional or management or white-collar positions, and a wage is paid to manual and unskilled workers, usually leadership. And pay is often interchanged with wages. I mean, we have different semantics here and part of I believe they refer to stipend in here. I'm just going to try to get that straightened out.
Bob, you had something you wanted to say?
Could we say?
I'm a little slow, Frank, but I got there.
Come on. Bob, you don't have to come on.
No, we have the name of the man who asked for the business card because I don't know how your name, sir.
P-A-K-I-S, George.
Good evening again, town board, lawyer for the town. There are over 60 counties in New York State, and close to 300 units of local government. As a result of that, the state of New York, for a long period of time, determined that they were going to have some order in how these towns were to be managed and villages were to be managed. And they required the people that were responsible for those towns to adhere to a process established by law in a series of rules and regulations where the legislative bodies asked various state authorities to be in charge. And the one that was charged with making recommendations as to whether or not you fulfilled the law and adhered to the rules and regulations was the Secretary of State, who promulgated all sorts of books and ledgers on how to run the village and how to run a town. And that was called process. Lawyers love process. And they love substance because they can beat you on process rather than beat you on substance. So they came out with a process. If you chose not to go along with that process, it was deemed to be against the law, or, if one wants to look at the dictionary, illegal. Illegal. If you refused to adhere to the recommendations that were put out by the people responsible for telling you and advising you, that was illegal also. Now the Secretary of State holds schools, demands that you go to one in the town board at least once a year.
We all have.
That's wonderful.
But I never, in any school, learned that you had to do a resolution to give somebody a raise. And in that Blue Town manual, I have scoured it, and I do not find anything in there that says the town board should do a resolution to give somebody a raise. Now, I may have missed it, but I've scoured that manual. Is it practical? After learning what I learned, it sounds pretty practical. But at the time when it was going on, it didn't seem to matter. We put the money in the budget. That's what made it legal. And now we do resolutions. Once I learn something, I'm gonna correct it.
Well, you have tweaked the process, and the comptroller doesn't agree with you.
I don't,
Now, even in heydays in other towns and so on and so forth, when you develop a budget, you have to give a copy of that budget to the state of New York, who then goes through the budget and puts all the salaries down to the people that you passed during the process of developing the budget. And there's a simplicity. If you want to change the budget, which you are doing by giving somebody bonus, stipend.
No bonus, no stipend.
Whatever you want to call it.
Raises, Bob, raises.
Raises. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. Mary Lou gets 1/3 of her salary from doing this item, and it's charged to that item in the budget. And 1/3 to another item, and 1/3 to a third item. However, if you change that matrix, whether it's Mary Lou or anybody else, it always has to go
And that's what
to
we
the
do.
town board because it is a change in the budget. And I will be happy to give you the quotes to show that what you can't find in there is there. And I would be pleased to do that. Now, my question is this. You have a problem. This town board has a problem.
Not anymore.
Well, that's not really true. These people are here because they think you have a problem. And that problem basically is credibility. And you really have to do more. And I am suggesting that in order to satisfy everyone in the town, to show that you did it correctly, is to hire a credible CPA, one of the stature of your brother, but certainly not your brother.
That's right, it's too expensive.
And he's also in
I
Vermont.
got one for 150 coming in, so.
And you should have
Proposal, we're gonna hire her, she's gonna come in for a few weeks, then once a month, and she's gonna oversee the entire accounting process. It's already in the works.
Well, not exactly the way I am asking you to do it,
Well,
because I don't think that you should spend a lot of money training somebody to do that. I think you should have a CPA come in here and go back over not just the number of people that the Secretary of State reviewed, but everybody. And you should also then correct all the data that you sent to the state that was incorrect. For example, for whatever reason, the previous supervisor decided that he wasn't going to take his pay as salary, when he was going to be a vendor and not pay Social Security, et cetera, and so forth, even though he was retired. So his salary does not show up on the state books. And these things that take place periodically, as you say, that are not documented. Yes, Carol, we couldn't find your name on that either.
On what? On the budget? On what? I'm sorry.
Well, the town has a obligation by law to report to the state of New York once a year on what the salaries were in the budget for the town employees and town board members. You are absent from that because you don't pay Social Security and all the other things that are attached to whatever compensation that you get.
I certainly do. I pay Social Security. I do not seek retirement from the town because I retired from state tax taken out and federal tax. And
Not as an employee, Carol. And I would be happy to dispute that with whoever you have taking care of your accounting facilities.
Payroll clerk.
So I think you should go back and take a look, not just a couple of years, but several years. Put in the correct data that the state asked you to put in that was not correct, so that you can honestly compare the town of Lake George with Bolton or Queensbury, because you can't do that now. Because these little quirks that took place that were not recorded, that I believe are illegal, okay, that you called, what was that word? It was a very interesting word. Inadequate, you called it something. You forgot about it?
Inadvertently. Inadvertently.
Yeah. Well, it's more than that. So clear the air. Hire a good CPA firm.
We hired one. Well, we have enough.
But let's go back and finish the audit. And let's go back and have the CPA firm certify that you've done all the things that you were doing. Thank you very much.
again, Fran Heinrich is in the same situation. She retired from the county. She does not take retirement from the town. Is she also left off that?
Anybody that doesn't go through the withholding system has a problem. Anybody.
I'm on a civil service payroll certification here for the county of Warren, the Ottawa. I don't understand.
I'll be happy to
Would you like to see my
explain.
W-2?
Yes, love to.
Okay, we'll get it. We'll get it.
Now, does anybody want to refute anything that I've said?
Well, I mean, I think we agree on some things. We agree that we need to bring in an independent CPA. That's something that we, you know, Vinny and I have been talking about it for probably 6 months. And, you know, we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we can. And until it came to a critical mass that we thought that in order to restore our credibility that we needed a CPA, we didn't pull the trigger. But haven't we been?
Yeah, we've been talking about it.
You know, and it's, you know, now, we think that we've arrived at the point where maybe we need some oversight. But really, truly, Bob, there's nothing wrong. We're going to have close to I don't know, I can't, it's a guessing game, but we should have close to a $400,000 fund balance at the end of the year. We shouldn't have to do a RAN this year. You know, we had one bad year, and we tried to spend down the fund balance. We didn't want to have $1 million sitting in some bank account and raise taxes every year. So we spent the fund balance down, but we ran into a bad year when we didn't get any sales tax. And I'm sure you were caught short not getting sales tax. I know Vinny and Scott were, and it came to a head. The worst thing that ever happened is we had to go out and borrow $300,000 for a few months until we got our sales tax, until we got our mortgage taxes. But it isn't like, you know, we had to shut down the highway department or something. We had to borrow some money. It happened. Nadine, the controller, told me it happened to half the towns in the Adirondack. She said everybody ran into the same problem that you did. All right.
So
We agree with you.
you'd like to see a CPA review,
An
an independent CPA review all the rates. You'd like to see that?
I'd like to
now,
see-
the 20 that the auditors picked randomly, we've gone over and.
Oh, I think they should
I just want to make
completely.
sure I understand what you're asking for. Would you like to see independent CPA review?
I'd like to see them go back in more years than the comptroller did, and I'd like to see him completely audit all the employees.
And what's gonna come of it?
It's an expense, and
Where are we going? What's the end result?
Well, let's put it this way, for a long period of time, you threw out the process that the state set up for you and did your own. Now you're suffering from it. So start all over again. Find out where all the bad things are.
And what's that gonna prove?
What's it gonna prove to me?
Yeah.
It will prove to me that you've got the foresight to look forward into the future and start all over again.
Well, you know, a number of people have said to me, just end it and start over, and, you know, you're a new board. You started in 2010 when this board took over. We started doing things correctly. Move on.
Well, we talked a few minutes ago about process and substance. My plea to you is to use as the process for starting all over again a complete audit of the town's employees for a lengthy period of time as the basis for you starting all over again. They admit they only did a few employees. They admit that they only did a few years. So to erase the question, in my mind, and perhaps some others, let's go back and find out everything. And then you will have a process of going forward into the future with openness.
If our taxes were out of control, we would, you know, I could probably see your point of view. But we've got the lowest taxes around, $2.24 per thousand. There were just $9.50. The school was $9.70. The county's $5. We're the lowest around. There's, you know, if there's no money missing, everybody, the auditor said, there's no money missing.
Frank, you're the one who said it a few minutes ago. The town of Lake George is the smallest geographic town in the entire Adirondack Park. And that includes the village. Therefore, the services that the town renders are minuscule compared to the services that the village has been rendering for years. And there's always been this back and forth as to who does what. But years ago, they started the water system, they started the sewer system, et cetera, and so forth. So
we've got a water system and a sewer system. You started.
Yes, you do have a sewer system. And I discussed that issue with Vinnie at some length when the previous supervisor decided that the people over on the east side of the lake, forgive me if you live over there, in houses that the real estate market sell for over $1 million, decided that they were paying too much. So they reworked the value system and spread it out amongst retired people, individuals, and it was a terrible thing to do.
And they're asking that they rework it again.
Yeah.
I hope you do. I hope you correct that error.
No, in that favor again, it's still giving them too much.
That's how they got them to be millionaires.
Agree with you there. And I will agree.
But my neighbor, who's been retired for a number of years and getting a little crotchety and rough to do, he was amazed that his went up $200, but $200 was a lot of money. Mr. Presido was amazed that his went up. But of course, they didn't go up quite that much because you had some new development in town that you could spread out to the new guys. But anyway, the data that you'll be giving to these people to make these comparisons is incorrect. That should be the first thing that the accountant does. What was the true figures that you gave to the state of New York? The ones that you have are not correct. Not correct.
You were supervisor of this town from 1970 to 1978. I was the town clerk.
Great.
We had a great, good relationship. The formula that was in use then until 2006 included assessed valuation. That does not apparently affect this new formula. If it was, people on the east side would be paying more. I don't, we are going to look into the new, what worked until from 1968 until 2006, the same
I always thought that formula was fair,
But it didn't.
and it shouldn't have been changed.
Do you believe that water in, water out is a fair formula?
Who's
In other
before
words,
that?
go by gallons used?
Yes.
They're proposing
That's what.
water in, water out. Percentage
Well,
of-
really, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Lefty. And just let me point out, our town of Lake George has a lot more amenities than most towns. I mean, we have a first-class decommission. We have a tremendous emergency squad that we pay dearly for. We have, $123,000 we put into the library system. We pay for a lot of things that other towns don't pay for. But we pay for them because we have relatively low taxes and we think we can afford them. Now, when this 2% property tax cap becomes a reality, things are gonna change. And you should know that as well as anyone. You know, and it's people think, well, you got a big budget. But my budget of $5 million is the same budget that the mayor has across the street, and they are a lot smaller than the town of Lake George.
You'll excuse me, Frank, but I have to sit down.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome, Don. Thank you. Dave?
How you doing?
Well, I think there's absolutely extreme reason why you need to go back and correct your other data. If you're going to present credible budgets in the future, and you're comparing past history to what the future is going to be, you've got to be sure you're comparing apples and apples, not apples and oranges. And if you've got misclassified data going back, you better reclassify it. We're not going to believe the comparisons you're going to give in future budgets. That's what I got to do.
Anybody else? John, you ready? George?
When the state controller's office audited 20, of which 16 were found to have title pay, was the zoning enforcement officer among them?
No.
A zoning enforcement officer gets a title pay of $500 a year.
Well, he wasn't one of the 20.
I know. He gets a title pay of $500 a year. And so that comes out to about $1.60 a day. What kind of title work do you get for $1.60 a day?
What much?
Yeah. So my contention is there are others, and it was, in fact, in some cases it would be justified for a title, but I don't think that is. I think that is a gift. And so, as was proposed by Mr. Flack, it behooves enlightenment of everybody and full disclosure to, in fact, audit, or at least, it's very simple to do, how many of the employees get title pay?
Probably 75–80% of them. Because they got raises. That's how raises were given between, what is it, 2000, or 87, 1987 is when we started it.
I wasn't here, I mean, I left in 88, but in 89, I believe it was called merit increase. The title pay, I don't know, I've been researching this, but apparently came in, the word title pay in the year around 2000.
And with all the title pays, the salient point in all this is that the board wasn't part of it. Those things were given by one man, Mr. Tessier, and he who gives it out can take it back. It was, in fact, all those raises, whether merited or unmerited, were covert. And therein lies the rub. And that's why it would behoove the board, and Mr. Black didn't know it's an expense for a full audit. That's part of the disclosure.
Mr. Salvo?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
It's clear that the
$224,000 that the comptroller identified as being illegal payments is only the tip of the iceberg. You just mentioned 75% of the people on the payroll are getting title pay. He only found 16 people out of 60.
So John, what are you saying? Nobody should have got a raise? Is that what you're saying?
There's a way to give a raise. You just did it wrong.
Well, that's right. That's right, we did it wrong.
And the wrong has to be righted. And the comptroller has recommended the only right way to do it is to recover that money.
I disagree with that.
Okay, you can disagree. But if, any auditor worth his salt that finds 16 problems out of 20 investigations and doesn't go further, there's something wrong there. So we have, not only do we have more people getting the title pay, we have it over a longer period of time than the comptroller. So we could be talking in the order of $1 million here with no difficulty at all.
That was how raises were given. They were put into the budget and they were put under the line of title pay. That was how raises were given. Before I started, and I stopped it.
Frank, what account number is title pay? Because I've never seen it.
It isn't.
Well, you just said it was put under title pay in the budget.
No, it was put under, let's say for, let's go back to that highway secretary, okay? It was just put in her code number.
Okay.
Her code number was broken down into 3 categories. Longevity, okay? Title pay, and base pay. And the reason that, this is what Louis told me, the reason that he didn't want to just keep increasing the base pays all the time is that the next person that started would get that increased base pay.
Nonsense.
Well,
Nonsense.
Well, that's your opinion, Jack.
No, it's not my opinion. That's the way it works. That's why you have grades.
Well, we didn't have grades in Lake George.
That's what you should have had.
Well, we did.
If we had a union,
There's-
we
that's
have
a-
grades.
That's right, if they had a union, we'd have grades.
That is a lame brain excuse.
I don't know, John, it seemed pretty logical to me.
It's illogical.
Well, that's
Nobody
to
else-
you.
You know why it's illogical? Nobody else does it.
Well, the county does it, they have out-of-title pay, they just call it out-of-title pay. They don't call it title pay.
Is it budgeted? Is it something in the budget?
I'm sure it is down there, I can't read the county.
You were not able to substantiate the comptroller that you had in the budget.
No, I think the budget, no, that's not true, John, that's a mistake. I think what the comptroller said was, we used the wrong process. We should have done resolutions.
Right.
And we know that now, but we didn't know that back then.
If the process was wrong, the process was illegal.
No, it wasn't illegal, it was just wrong. Everything that is wrong is not illegal.
Oh, no?
No. If I put on a blue sock and a white sock and wear them down the street, it's wrong, but it's not illegal.
What's wrong with having one blue sock?
Let's see, John.
The other thing is that the bonuses that were paid, the terminations, they were not addressed in your resolution. How?
That they were not one of the 17 things that the auditors found wrong. They gave us 17 questions, we answered 17 questions.
Well, one of them was the fact that the 2 people got termination bonuses.
Well, they're supposed to get termination bonuses. They
Why would
didn't
you give
like the way we did it.
someone who's leaving employment gets...
I'm sorry, John, they were sick pay that they had not taken.
Call it sick pay.
It's in there.
It's not called, it wasn't called sick pay.
Sorry.
And I wasn't being crass because I talked to the town clerk in Queensbury, and they're, not just their highway people are unionized, they're part of CSEA in the non-managerial section of, in many sections of the town of Queensbury. And I was not being crass when I said that to you. They do have grades up to grade 10 under the union process.
I understand, that's the purpose of it, that someone who comes in new at a lower grade doesn't command the same salary for the same position that someone leaving at grade 9 or 10 has. That's the purpose of it. That's logical.
Well, I think the grade thing is logical too, but back when I was on the town board, John, I didn't think about things like that. You know, when you're a food service salesman for 50 hours a week, and then you're a town board member, you come in, you do the best you can, but there's no class. I mean, there's classes for us to take, but they don't cover a lot. They don't cover all this minuscule.
Just one other thing, the comptroller's report quotes you as saying that you relied on the guidance of town council for what you did in the resolution. What's the form and content of this guidance?
I don't know. We want to go into that. We were in executive section.
Well, we can summarize very simply. The town board conferred with me at great length about the issues that are being discussed here tonight. Obviously, the exact, first of all, I don't remember the exact words spoken. Second of all, it's certainly subject to the attorney-client privilege, but without saying anything that's beyond the obvious, there was substantial discussion about a range of options, including, I don't mean to keep going back to it, but I like the analogy a lot, including should we try to get the chocolate bars back. And in fairness, I don't think that the woman who made the comment about the chocolate bars was trying to make it sound like these were little insignificant things. I think she was just using that as an analogy, and I really like the analogy. So one of the things that was discussed at substantial length with me as town council was, what are the practicalities and legalities of trying to get the money back? There were discussions held. Those were obviously not held in open public meetings, nor should they have been held in open public meetings, in my opinion. For one thing, you don't want to, if you end up in a litigation situation, you don't want to bear your litigation strategy in open public meeting to those against whom you're proceeding in a lawsuit. But there were substantial discussions between the town board and myself as town council, and it is absolutely 100% correct that the town board's ultimate action took place after substantial consultation with me as town council. It's also absolutely 100% correct, and I'm sure the town board members will agree with this, that I don't make the decisions of policy nature. I don't even make recommendations on policy matters. I just provide them with the legal advice. But it is absolutely 100% correct that substantial discussions between the town board and myself as town council occurred about these very issues that are being discussed tonight.
And those discussions led to the resolution that was adopted. Those discussions were in agreement.
The discussions certainly included, those discussions included the town board adoption of that resolution. I don't mean literally the adoption. The adoption happened at an open public meeting, but the town board certainly conferred with me about the wisdom and legality of adopting that resolution. Correct.
The legality.
Correct.
And I assume that the resolution reflects your interpretation of the law.
You can assume anything you like about my legal advice. You've been assuming it for 20 years and you keep doing it.
Thank you,
seriously, you folks seem to think this is a joke.
No, we don't.
Can I say one thing? I hope you don't take my comment as a joke because it wasn't intended that way. You appear regularly before municipal boards that I provide legal guidance. I have my opinion about the quality and the veracity, the accuracy, and the honesty of the statements you make to those municipal boards. You have made literally hundreds of statements in which you have stated you've made certain assumptions about the legal advice I've provided. My experience has been those assumptions have been generally incorrect. But I don't think it's a productive exercise for you and I to have that debate here or anywhere else. That was not a flippant remark on my part, and I apologize to members of the audience if anyone took it that way. Mr. Salvador and I have a little bit of history, and I was being serious when I said I don't think it would be a productive use of this forum's time or anyone else's time for he and I to debate about his assumptions about my legal advice.
John, if I knew now, or if I knew back then what I knew now, I would be pounding down the door to do resolutions for races. I didn't know it. It sounded logical. Louis had been a supervisor for close to 16 years when I got on the town board. He made sense. We put it in the budget, we vote on the budget. That's where the raises are.
How could you tell they were there? There were no captions on the numbers.
If somebody got a raise, in their title, in their code, it went from $46,000 to $47,000. That's how you knew they got a raise.
But how would you know what their code was if it wasn't, what the description wasn't there? How could you tell?
In the organizational meeting, you had a spot with your name on it.
He didn't put, towards the end, he didn't put the title pay in the organization.
In 19, up until 19.
But he changed the resolution to, it says base salary and longevity.
Until 1992, John, it said the full salary, and for all the years I was here, it was full salary next to the person's name. However, in 92, something happened. I wasn't here at the time, but I researched the minutes. Something changed. We went to base salary and longevity. The reason for it, I guess, is what Frank tried to explain that Luke said about the base pay being the same for anyone who start. I didn't quite exact, but I found out that was, I agree, and it should have been in the organizational minutes.
Thank you for your time.
Kathy? Sorry you were waiting patiently over there.
Hello. I'll start with a good note, that I greatly appreciate the changes you immediately made in the payroll process to eliminate 4 or 5 of these recommendations. I honestly don't even know where to start. I mean, I have 15 questions, I have 25 questions and 3 to 4 on each recommendation. And I think it all comes down to transparency. There are minutes out there that are wrong. Frank, you and I had this discussion. The minute your organizational minutes came out in 2010, I looked at them compared to 2009, and I called you. I said, Frank, you promised me people were not getting anything more than a 3% raise. Because on top of these yearly amounts, they all got raises, and they got longevity. That was not just the raise, they got percentage raises too.
Now, what years now?
2010, when those organizational minutes came out.
Yeah.
I called you, I sent it to every board member in 2010.
We put the...
Well, let me finish.
Let me answer.
No, but you don't even know what my question is. Wait, I sent it to every one of you. I said, 2009, 2010, wait, somebody got a 46% increase. And you said, well, Lou always did it wrong. Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Go back and fix it then. Go back, because all that data is registered with the state, and it's wrong. And you need to fix those things that you found out were wrong. You knew in the first 2 months of 2010. And they still continue. Hold on. Those things stayed with those employees. So you built it into the budget in 2010.
We put the correct figures in the budget.
In the organizational
In the organization.
minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. But you never explained to anybody. I asked, I gave it to every board member.
I told you.
No, I think you have a responsibility to tell everybody. Did you know that? Did everybody know that they didn't just get a 3% increase? They got extra title pay and it wasn't listed. Did everybody know that?
Nobody got anything extra, Kathy.
Frank,
What we
the
did-
2009 minutes said one thing, and then the 2010 said something different. And it's unreasonable that you don't say right in 2010, restated 2009, not comparable, because that's not transparent. It's not.
That's your opinion. I thought putting the right salary figures in there was transparent.
Frank, I'm sorry, but
Well,
putting the
I'm
right
sorry, I
thing
disagree
is,
with you, Kathy.
putting the right thing is what should happen all the time. Putting the right thing is not a question. We expect.
What do you want, the
to do
wrong
right
thing? What do you mean putting the right thing is not a question?
The expectation, Frank, is that you will follow the law and
We
do
did,
it right.
we did. When I took over, we started.
No, you were on the board before that.
I didn't know the number. I didn't know
You just told
everybody's
everybody
salary.
that you said it every paper, and you just said, here, we knew about it and they deserved it.
Carol, when did you tell me about the salary being lost?
In the early part of 2009, that's when I wasn't present, obviously, I wasn't on the board in 2007 when the 2008 budget was passed. In 2008, the 2009 budget was passed. Shortly after that, I had reason to question what the salary was. And I was told the difference between what the organization had said. I realized that there must be something wrong because the person answered me, that's my title tag. And I began to immediately check on what the W-2s were from 2008.
So why did we have to wait until August of 2010 as the taxpayers to understand that information?
I told you in January of 2010, when you said, why did all these salaries go up? I told you.
You told me.
Well, nobody else asked. Nobody else asked.
Is there a here?
Public information.
You got to get the information, you have to ask. That's not fair, Frank.
Well,
It goes back to transparency. And I'd like to comment on.
That was your question, okay.
Are you cutting me off?
I think so.
I don't
Will I take somebody else's question?
You can have mine, Kathy.
All right, shoot another one. All you're trying to do is smear me, Kathy. That's all you're trying to do.
Frank, we promised each other on the phone that we would not do this.
Yeah.
Kathy's being very calm and she's trying to ask questions. I promised you I would do it. I asked that you do the same thing. I know it's hard to sit there and not feel defensive. Just listen to each other and try to be calm with each other. It's the way that it's going to work the best for the community. Please.
Then have her be civil.
I think she has been.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure where to start.
Make reference to the audit, so
Okay. Recommendation number one.
Okay.
The recommendation number one, the answer was that you have cut expenses, and that there were 3 less employees at the highway at the rate of in the highway department. Are there 3 less bodies right now, and have their full salaries been saved?
Recommendation number one, the board and town officials should develop a comprehensive plan.
Yeah, and your answer was we've already cut expenses and we've cut 3 people. When I looked at the budget, I didn't see a huge 3 people number in the payroll from 2010 into 2011. I didn't see a big reduction of 3 people.
I know what you do.
Right, but is it in the budget? Did you plan for it? Did it happen in 2011? And have those full salaries been eliminated?
They are still in the budget. They're
Still in the budget.
I left them in there because at the end of the year, I'll have a lot more money left over.
We did a lot of cuts as we've gone over.
So the expenses have not been cut as noted. Okay.
Yes, they are. You're going to have a big surplus at the end of the year.
We cut a lot of it.
But I didn't cut the salary codes.
It's hard for, that's what I was asking, because it's hard when you look at the budget, you can't see that the action you said you took is not identified in the budget.
We will,
So we have to wait till the end, like December reports come out to see that you have in fact done that.
Well, I didn't know if we could get through the year without people, and so I didn't take the salaries out, because if we had to hire somebody, then I'd have been short on salary code. But we made it through, things seem to be working well, and we'll have, money left over in all those codes at the end of the year. And we decrease the taxes.
I'm going to go on to recommendation number 2. The procedures that the town boards use for budget preparation up until this audit and this response have failed the taxpayer. As noted, the board should adopt realistic budget estimates for revenues, expenditures, and available fund balances. If they're telling you that, then the process has failed. What exact procedural changes, which you've noted in your response, will the town board make in this next budget process that will assure there's no failure in 2012?
Well, Kathy and I sat down, we agonized, we went over the department heads, we did a realistic budget. I don't know what more you can.
Line by line.
So, wait, 2012 I'm talking. I'm saying the process failed in 2011 and prior.
No.
Well, I'll go back to what they said. The board should adopt realistic budget estimates for revenues, expenditures, and available fund
They were
balance.
talking about 2008, 9, and stuff like that before I did it.
Okay, they said it as of August 2010, so that included 2010. So you said you changed what you do.
Bob Elliott, the auditor, helped me do the budget. So anything, if he wasn't happy with it, he would have told me. I mean, I'm not saying he did it line by line, but he advised me. What was the thing he said? Overstate your expenses and understate your revenues. And that's the. No, well, overstate your revenues and understate.
What about realistic instead of overstate and
Well, the
understate?
main goal of our budget was to rebuild our fund balance.
But you didn't put a fund balance in there, so the goal failed.
I don't think so. We'll have a large surplus at the end of the year, and then we'll put that towards fund balance.
Kathy, do you have anything to say about it?
Just that we are looking at monitoring budgets very closely.
Well, I'm talking about the process.
Yeah.
And the process didn't work before, as OSC has identified. So what I'm hearing you say is what you're doing different is that you and Frank and the auditor are having discussions about how to do it differently. I would like to say, please consider the public workshops starting in August, as has been requested in the past, to allow for timely input by taxpayers. This last budget process allowed for one meeting of taxpayer comment, and no comments were considered for the budget. The budget was passed without any discussion of the taxpayers' comments or concerns at the same meeting. Please do not do that in 2012.
I mean, do you really feel qualified to do a town budget?
No.
Okay. And what input are you going to bring to a town budget?
It was quite bad. It's the same input that I've been bringing for 3 years, where your cash balances were wrong, and OSC confirmed it. Half the problems that are listed in their audit, I brought to you. Over the last 3 years, I brought to the board. So in a prior life, I was a CPA. I'm the CFO of a company. So I do have significant experience, and I think that I've helped you people along in many different cases, which is what taxpayers are trying to do.
I just want to comment, like the school does a budget workshop with the community, so it's the same kind of thing.
Well, we've got a budget workshop, Karen.
You know, so they allow for public input on.
We allow for public.
You voted the same night. I mean, even Mrs. Heinrich said, you know, how can we vote on this right now? We haven't even taken their comments into consideration.
I think that's the issue, is you voted that day, rather than considering what the taxpayers said.
Consider a workshop.
Kathy, what are the things from the town of Bethlehem that you said?
I gave them a list of the town of Bethlehem that has significant, workshops and public input, but I would recommend the same thing. Has the 2010 AUD been filed? Yes. It's not listed as it's been filed. Do you have?
Yeah.
So was it filed timely, 60
Yes.
days?
Always.
And does it have the correct salaries as noted with everything paid to people?
It has the correct budget numbers.
Well, actuals, these are actuals.
Yes.
I guess I'm going to summarize here with one item that, when you started the meeting, Frank, we're all concerned, obviously. This is a significant lack of managerial support on the part of the board. And when you started the meeting, you said these are just recommendations. They're based on law. They're really important. And when we ask you to give us the details, like the backup for the resolution, it's because we have the right to know. We're not asking for anything that we don't have the right to know, and it goes back to transparency. So when we ask to give details and you fight us, you say, I'll take it under advisement, that's not transparency to us. I would suggest that that resolution that people have talked a great deal about, I would believe that we had other options. And if I can ask Mark Shackner here, if that had been passed properly, as OSC noted? Would the details of the person and the amount have been made public?
I understand the question. I think the town board did validate the resolution.
No, that was my question. If it had been,
The first thing you said was, if that had been passed properly. And I'm saying, I was present when the town board passed the resolution you're asking about, and I believe it was passed properly, meaning in accordance with lawful procedure. So I can't answer a question about that resolution that starts if it were passed properly, because it was.
I think you're misunderstanding me, okay?
Take another shot.
If those increases in that salary information had been done properly as OSC said, which was in the past.
I totally misunderstood that.
Yes. If it had been done properly in the past, would the details by employee have been part of the resolution?
I have the faintest idea.
What's required by law?
What's required by law is annual budgets stating compensation to be paid by employees. The resolutions themselves actually don't have to have those words in them, but the budgets do.
So someplace, by person, the proper salaries, including everything they were going to be paid, should have been provided to the taxpayer in a transparent manner.
Not true, not provided to the taxpayer.
Yeah, by position.
Not true.
No.
There's no mailing to the taxpayer. No, not true. There's no mailing to the taxpayer.
You know what, Mark, you're much smarter than me, so I know you can get me on the words.
No, I'm just-
What I'm trying to say to you is that the public and the taxpayer do legally have the right to know what certain positions
No question.
are paid.
Every position.
So having known that, we have that right. Why would you not have suggested or assisted the board in being transparent to attach that information to this very vague resolution?
I wasn't involved in any of those resolutions.
No, this, I'm going back to this one that Frank told me you wrote. That could be, I mean, I don't know who wrote it. But the resolution that just came out, which left great ambiguity, great questions. Why would you not have suggested to the board to be transparent, to attach the detailed information that those of us have the legal right to know?
For starters, I'm not sure that detailed information exists.
Yes, it does, because OSC has it.
Well, okay, then you know more about this than I do, which is entirely possible.
Well, I guess
I want to tell you, I think the town board met in an open public meeting, very few people attended, and that's not a criticism, because, you know, big time meetings are hard to attend. The town board adopted a resolution. You and others disagree with the resolution. That's totally your right to disagree.
I'm asking you as the lawyer that do you represent us as the taxpayers, or do you represent the board?
Town of Lake George.
So you don't represent the taxpayers?
No. Not literally in the sense of taxpayers can't call me up and ask for legal advice.
Okay. That's unfortunate. I thought you were representing us.
Okay, but you're putting words in my mouth. What I said was, taxpayers can't call me up and ask for legal advice. That's all I would do. The town board could authorize that. This town board hasn't, and I'm not aware of any town board in the state of New York that has.
That is what?
Authorizes town council to field questions from the constituents as they wish.
Well, I think that you would have done every taxpayer and every resident a favor to help the board in transparency, and that resolution was far from it. And I would ask you to consider that going forward, that all we want is information, and that we have the right to a great deal of what we
I'm
talk
actually
about.
quite the open government supporter. I've written articles about open government. I'm published about open government. You don't agree with my position on this resolution, and you're entitled to your opinion.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Joe?
I have a few questions of the board about the audit. In the audit, it stated that there was going to be a corrective action plan within 90 days.
Correct.
Are you planning to do that?
Correct.
And will it be available once you give it to the auditors, to the public?
The auditors will make it public after they go 30 days after they do it.
Okay. And in your notes here that are attached to the audit, lists off several policies and procedure changes that you've made. Are they going to be documented and, so that the public can access them in some sort of book or whatever you normally do to change the procedures?
Which one, Joe?
Well, I don't necessarily have to go through each one, but
Give us one example.
well, take an easy one. Number 16, flexible work schedules that differ from work hours established in the employee handbook or town policy should be pre-approved by the town supervisor. It's a very simple one. You just
They send me an email if somebody's gonna deviate from the schedule. I've got,
right, but I'm not asking about. I'm asking is the process documented.
the process document.
I mean,
Do we have a thing that says the employee shall send Frank McCoy an email? It's gonna be in the new handbook.
Okay, but I'm concerned that 5 years down the road,
It's gonna be,
somebody
a lot of
has to
that
have
stuff
these
is-
processes and procedures documented so that the next wave.
A lot of that stuff's gonna be in the new handbook.
Okay. The next thing I have is a question. Are we, the town, going to have a job description in the salary range? I mean, several discussions were about that, you know, grade levels, and so that when a person comes in, first, he starts at a lower level, and he can grow to this range from after years of service. Is there any thoughts about that?
There's thoughts about it, but it's about where we are. I mean, thinking about it, it's,
We do have discussions ongoing with the county personnel department. Yes, regarding those issues.
Right.
Joe, I'd like to see what you're talking about, because as I say, the town of Queensburg, Fran Heinrich, well, this councilman Heinrich and I have been working on that employee handbook. And since 2010, there was an employee handbook done in 1996. And through the years, it was amended. But I found it sadly lacking. And in 2008, I asked when I first came on board to be on the personnel committee, and I was told by the supervisor that there was no longer a personnel committee, everyone did it. In 2010, we started the personnel committee again, which I thought should have been. When I was here many years ago, there never was a personnel committee. There never was an employee handbook, to my knowledge. But through the years, of course, things have changed. We've grown. The town grew. And we hope to have that handbook that Fran and I would say, have been working on. Done hopefully by the first part of July now anyway. It will be reviewed by the town board. And we have certain sections that are reviewed. Most of them are reviewed. They've gone back to the consultant. I say that when I have the original handbook, and a lot of it didn't make sense to me. And we are working on that.
Yeah, Joe, I think
the policies and procedures that you're talking about will be in that handbook.
I assume that you're comparing it to like Old North Queensbury and some other, so that you get a feel for.
we are not the highest paid town around.
Right.
Horicon and Chestertown both pay their employees more than we do, at least in the highway department.
Right.
You know, so we're gonna come up with a salary range. I mean, I've kind of seen what they've done down to the county now, and that's something that they just instituted last year down there as a salary range. You know, depending on experience, things like that.
And two other points. One is as you know, I'm very familiar with your budget, and I would like to see a quarter-to-quarter comparison. That is to say, revenue and expenses by budgets, by groups, whatever you want to call them, for the previous 2 years versus like you had 2009, 2010 first quarter, 2009 first quarter, 2010 first quarter, and 2011 first quarter. Expenses and revenues comparison to see how you're tracking.
Yeah, that's too, Kathy.
Yeah. I mean, you know, that will help you.
We actually are doing.
I do it. I get it now.
Yeah.
Do it for 1 year. I don't do 1 year now.
But I'm saying by quarter,
Yeah.
and go back 2 years so that you can forecast and see what's happening. The other thing, point I want to make is that periodically I hear references that the town of Lake George versus this Lake George School District versus whatever. I was associated with comparisons, what you usually call benchmarks, where you're comparing yourself against another group. And in this particular case, I don't feel it's correct to compare yourself against the school district because it's completely apples and oranges. You need to compare yourself against Bolton or Chestertown or, and see. And it's a very difficult and very large effort because you have to get down into how many miles of roads do they plow. And you get into that type of thing to do comparisons. I mean, corporations do these benchmarks against them, and you have to detail out what the differences are so you can understand it. The best thing that comes out of those things is usually procedures and policies and how they do things. You might get a few good ideas, comparison to Bolton or to Queensbury or to somebody else. But comparison to a school district versus the town of Lake George is not a valid comparison. That's all I have. Thanks.
Just to add to what Mr. Stenning said about the quarterly reports, I think you also need to do one on sources and uses of cash. Sources and uses of cash, sometimes referred to as cash flow.
I get a cash flow report.
It's not quite cash flow, but we ought to see that on a quarterly basis as well.
Yes.
I'll start by introducing myself because I know most everyone, but I'm not sure that they all know me. My name is Whitney Russell. I lived in this town for 30 years. I've been a taxpayer for 28 years, and I've raised all three of my children in this town. I want to start out by thanking you for taking the time to be here tonight, by setting this meeting up, giving us an idea of where we stand as a town, where this money is going. Some of the things that bother me, though, is how many of these employees got this money, number one. I know that we've done an audit, the audit did 20 people. Also, did any of the past town board members ever get any money above and beyond their posted salary?
No.
Okay.
Pardon me,
Now,
since I've been on the board, we've gotten a cost of living increase,
which is in the budget, is clearly noted. Yes, I understand that. What I can't understand is if none of you handed out that money, and if none of you got any of that money, why would you pass a resolution and attach your name to something that questionably was done illegally or not? And I'm not the attorney that's going to determine that. But why would you try to fix something that the past supervisor did wrong by just covering it up with a resolution?
Well, I don't think we tried to cover it up. I think what the auditors asked and what we tried to do was to justify that those people got raises that were earned and deserved. And when I look down every single one of them, I've got a list of what the employees in this town make. There's nobody overpaid. There's nobody underpaid. They're paid about what they should be paid.
And I'm not questioning. I don't want to question that any of those people didn't deserve the money that you gave them. My concern is, as a taxpayer, I was told they were getting X amount of dollars. In reality, they were getting more than that. And then, when we look at the audit and we look at the line items, and you look at the fund balances going from $1.3 million to $234,000, I realize we went through a downturn in the economy and everything else. But I'm not an accountant, okay? I'm a taxpayer. I'm trying to pay my mortgage. I'm trying to pay my taxes. I'm trying to stay ahead. I'm trying to pay $4 or trying not to pay $4 a gallon for gas. How about that? But when I look at this, if my financial advisor called me up and said, "Hey, your account just went from 1.3 million to 224,000." Wait a minute, we got a problem. And I think that's why all these people are here tonight.
Well, part of it is, Whitney, is we made a conscious effort to not have $1 million fund balance. And tell you a quick story or how this thought process came. I was thinking about Dan Steck down in Queensbury and how he beat, who was that? Borges? Not Borges, Dennis Bauer. How he beat Dennis Bauer. Well, Dennis Bauer had a $4 or $5 million surplus, and Steck went in there and said, that's crazy, look at all this surplus they got, blah, 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 it's too much, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, that was one little tiny thought in the back of my breast. Louis would run around, we got $1 million, $1 million, he'd tell everybody, you know. And so I think, did I go to you, or how did this really come about? Or, you know, Vinny and I started talking about it about 2006. This $1 million is going to get us in trouble. If we got $1 million and we're raising taxes, it's going to get us in trouble. So why don't we spend the $1 million down? And that was the plan. We didn't raise taxes for like 5 years, or if we did, it was, you know, pennies. It was minuscule. And then 2008 hit. And, you know, we didn't get the sales tax, we didn't get the mortgage tax, we didn't get the taxes that we anticipated, and that's when we ran into a cash flow problem.
Well, I can remember quite a few years ago with the school budget, they were asking for $600,000 to put in a pocket somewhere, in case they needed to fix the roof on the building.
Right.
And my question was, well, wait a minute, does the roof need to be fixed? No. Then why do we need to have $600,000 sitting in an account? If the roof needs to be repaired, then we'll give you the money. We'll put it in the budget. Let's get it resolved. But don't just put $600,000 in an account for the hell of saying it's there. So I applaud you for not having a huge surplus. All I'm concerned with is when it comes around to next year, are we going to have enough money to pay the bills? And my taxes aren't going to go up. And the year after that, and I know you can't make promises.
I'm trying.
And I hope the economy comes
Taxes
back.
are going up.
Right. What's that?
Taxes are going up.
Oh, I realize that because we got a lot of changes coming. Okay?
But we should have enough money. When I did the budget this year, I did what Bob Elliott told me. I overstated expenses and understated revenue. So at the end of the year, we should have a fair amount of money. I'm guessing somewhere around 400,000, maybe a little bit more than that. But that's what we should have for a fund balance. And then we'll be fine. We'll be like every other town.
Okay, I'll leave you alone with one final question, one final request. As this board moves forward, can you please not spend 1 penny of money you have told everyone in this town about, every taxpayer? Now, if you want to pay somebody $60,000 to plow roads, great.
We don't pay anybody.
Tell me that you're going to pay them that kind of money, because I'll quit my job and I'll come here and plow roads. Okay. All right.
Now, we are very, you know, financially responsible, and I've got every, what's the word? Every code now has an explanation next to it. And we spent $5,000 on new budget software, so it's much more readable. I mean, I sat down the other day and went over the first 5 months of the year, the budget, and, you know, and then Kathy and I had a meeting about it today. You know, right where we are, you know, we're in good shape, and, you know.
And from time to time, we're going to need to hire more employees. Some are going to retire, some are going to leave, we're going to need to hire more employees.
Yeah.
If they actually knew what the pay was, you might be able to interest people into coming here and taking those jobs.
Right.
But if they're posted at one amount, they're being paid a different amount, it doesn't work.
I
It's
was
not in our
the
best
cut
interest.
salaries when I took over in 2010.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Sure.
I want to say, for the benefit of the public, I think Mr. Russell asked an extraordinarily important question. His first question, and a compliment for asking it, and I'm going to paraphrase it, it's not the words you used, but the first question that I heard Mr. Russell ask was essentially, did any elected officials benefit from any of the unauthorized payments? Is that a fair characterization?
Very good.
And I want to remind the board, I'm sure you'll confirm this, and I want to say to anybody in the public who cares what I think, that was the very first question I asked, was it not, Town Board?
That's correct.
And I want to assure anybody in the public who cares, I've been asked a number of questions about my legal advice. I want to assure anyone who cares about my legal advice that if that answer had been different than it was, the legal advice would also have taken that into account in a very substantial way. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
John?
My name's John Carr, Mill Road, Lake George. I apologize if some of these questions have been asked already. There was another meeting I had to attend earlier tonight. As somebody that runs several businesses and having been through state fund worker comp audits, sales tax audits, IRS audits for 20 years, I don't envy you guys to have to go through them. And quite honestly, I've yet to go through one and have them completely walk away and say everything's just fine. They usually find something. Obviously, the longer it's been, the more they're going to find, and I think that's a lot of the situation that's here right now. I hope moving forward, that the board will consider, and there's a lot of people, very talented, professional people that are very good with numbers, and people, like Joe, that can offer the board a lot of assistance, with it. And I hope moving forward that those people in the public and the board work together to, kind of keep each other in mind. I think it helps the public to understand what you guys are doing, and I think it also helps you guys to understand, what the public thinks of it as you go through this process moving forward. The only question for me, and I guess having been through these audits with all these other agencies, at the end of the day, did I always pay the right amount of sales tax? Yes, you did. Fine. My question to this board is, was there any money missing? No. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for coming. I'll just make one last statement, and I'm probably repeating myself, but when we took over, when this board took over, we really tried to correct all the things that we knew that were wrong. Some of them we knew, some of them we didn't know until the audit came. But if I'd have known back in 2004, 5, 6, what I know now, things would have been different. But I didn't know it. And unfortunately, I went with what I thought was being done right. And it may come back to bite me, but my heart was in the right place. We still have a tremendously low tax base. There's no money missing. That's what I gotta say.
Good.
Yeah, I guess I can. I too would like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I appreciate all your viewpoints, your concerns, and your ideas. My thoughts are this: the citizens wanted a meeting, and we've had it. I'm hoping that this meeting has begun to restore your confidence in us. We stated that we're considering hiring an independent CPA, which is going to be costly, which may even raise your taxes. These are things we've said we may consider. We've also said we'll consider holding budget workshops. With that being said, I'd like to see this community begin to unite. It's very important to me that we move forward as well as it is to you. And I'm hoping that after tonight we can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for coming. Motion to adjourn.